during my time, there is no bank that collapsed. I was governor of the Central Bank of Kenya from March 2007 to the beginning of March in 2015. That does not mean, Mheshimiwa Majority Leader Bwana Kimani Ichung'wah, that there were no problems. There were problems. But you have to make sure that you bring in or you develop new solutions and new interventions to save the market. And that's what we did. There were several mergers, but those mergers were actually geared towards preventing any collapse of the banks, because market situations do change. Some projections in marketplace can change. And so the regulator must know what to do. A regulator is not someone who is waving an axe in the market. A regulator is a person who is trying to understand the market, help develop the market, and the third one is regulate and protect the market. So those three dimensions are very, very important for a regulator. And that is what I did for most of the time that I was there. Now, of course, the affidavits that have come up, let me comment on them. One, the first point I would like to make, Mr. Chairman and honorable members who have asked this question, is that we want to stop at the first point of just mentioning what it is. We don't want to go further and see what has happened. The case, for example, for the procurement, I fought it through the courts to the Court of Appeal, and there was a judgment. The case of Grad Regency, I think the statement is that I was adversely mentioned. I was an agent of government, and this was a government-to-government sale, and I was the one to negotiate and to receive the payment, which was actually received by the government. And for your information, the end result was that it gained 3.114 billion shillings that was actually used in Lamu to dredge the port. The idea in government then was that such recovery from corruption proceeds should be used in fixed investments that would give Kenyans perpetual benefits. And that is how it was allocated there. There was a commission of inquiry that was started, but it was supposed to check whether the sale was appropriately done. Now, the whole issue was, how was it appropriately done? According to that commission, it valued the hotel at 1.8 billion. Then the question they were asked, what about the central bank? How did it value the hotel? It was at 2.2 billion. And then how much was the hotel sold by the central bank? It was sold at 2.8 billion. The difference between 2.8 billion and 3.114 is because of the retained earnings during the operations. So in a sense, it was value for money, and that was what the committee was supposed to establish. Let me state this, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, that we are, and especially for me, I've been a victim of abuse of the criminal justice system. For example, the procurement that has been mentioned. The whole idea was to get Njuguna Ndung'u out of the central bank. How do you do it? That's why, even if you go to the records, you will just be embarrassed, the kind of facts. Now, the biggest problem I have, when Ichung'wah and the others who have asked the question, is that the National Human Rights Commission, the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, and the Transparency International should be coming to our aid as victims of abuse of the criminal justice system. But they are coming here to make us the victims. It's quite a paradox. It's actually extremely, I would like maybe to invite people to read even the judgment, even the Commission of Inquiry on Grad Regency. It's so interesting that they find it, that they become also a victim. It is something that we may want to check out, Mr. Chairman. It's something that we have to rethink about the mandate of some of these institutions, and it's something that we need to correct from the very beginning.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry to interrupt the good professor, but I feel he is on a tangent now to blame the petitioners. I just wanted him to clarify, because that was my question, Professor. In the interest of the country and the economy. We want to, if we approve you, to approve someone that will be confident, has no issues of integrity hanging over his head. And the opportunity now you have is to make that clear. And that's why I asked the status of the Grand Regency, which I have heard you clearly stated that you are exonerated by the Commission of Inquiry. Well, I hear my colleague saying no. So we want to know what was the status, what is the status of the charges on the 1.2 billion tender. You know, it's good to say it went to court, all the way you fought it to Court of Appeal. What was the verdict?
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, the tender issue, let me first of all say that it was very clear that CEOs are not involved in the procurement. Their work is only to appoint the procurement committee. And that matter went all the way to the appeal, and they showed that the problem was the procurement committee of the central bank, and I was vindicated. I had no role to play. The Grand Regency, again, is an issue. I've shown that the government position was that the proceeds could be invested, and they were really invested in that case. And maybe I can go to, so in actual fact, my role was very, very clear as an agent, and my role was also very, very clear that I had no role to play in procurement. But I wanted to go further to show that actually, when such issues come, although I'm trying to defend myself, when such issues come, also those people who bring them up, they should see the whole end.
Speaker, point of order. The nominee is not helping us make progress. For instance, he's saying talking about being vindicated in the Grand Regency cell. He's not saying by who. Because the report of the commission is clear that you are indicted. Yeah, Honour Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With due respect, and maybe I will seek your protection because I have never seen the report. I only remember that the government said those proceeds that the central bank has done well for raising that kind of money. It was invested in Lamu Port, and you are aware of that. And the whole conclusion was that if such resources coming from corruption proceeds are invested in the projects that provide perpetual benefits, then everybody is happy. Let me also move on to...
Speaker,
sorry.
Yes, maybe as a procedural matter of guidance to the committee, with all due respect to my colleague, the leader of minority. I don't know when, as a committee, we allude to a report. Is it not in order then, as a procedural issue, that a copy of that report is shared with the committee, so that either the nominee or other members of the committee are able to benefit from that? So that, Honourable Speaker, we avoid the issues of raising issues to the public gallery. And I say that with a lot of respect to my brother, because the earlier nominee who was here, Professor Kindiki, had the same issue on an issue that my brother was not able to, again, clear up properly, that indeed the allegations were against the law firm of Onesmus Kipchumba Murkomen and Company, not the law firm of Honorable Kindiki. So maybe, Speaker, you could guide us on that issue.
There were affidavits, one or two, sent to the committee through the clerk. I instructed that they be furnished to the nominee. I believe you have been served. And I did hear the two members make reference to those affidavits. I would encourage the nominee to answer questions. That's why I said precise and concise. When we go on to a long journey, we end up stumbling somewhere. So I would warn you, Professor, the three questions that were asked that cast aspersions on your integrity by Chungwa, Wandai, and Junet, just answer them straight and clear. Are they true? They are not. Was there a court process? How did it end? Did your wife go to Thailand on holiday paid by Imperial Bank? Was it Imperial Bank? If it wasn't, Because an allegation being raised by Junet, I've seen no evidence that it happened. Did it happen or did it not? It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Chair, not to interrupt you, Chair, with your indulgence. Also, you know, we are on Hansard. The nominee alluded in his response that even the report of the commission made him a victim. He said that when he was responding. So that means he's privy to the commission's report.
And even then,
I think he was on a struggle to defend himself. He said he's been a victim of many things.
Yeah.
So now that we have put him on track, let's hear his answers to your questions, which I'm sure he's privy to.
Thank you, Chairman. I get your advice, and I'll take. I'll be in that tandem. Let me say that in the first issue and the second issue, I think what I've said is that I've defended myself in terms of I defended myself through the court process. The Commission of Inquiry in terms of the Grad Regency, I was asked to surrender the money to dredge the Ramu port. All the proceeds were given.
You were asked as Njuguna Ndung'u or as governor of the central bank?
As governor of the central bank and also the agent who transacted that particular deal. The printing contract that Mheshimiwa Junet, with due respect, thank you very much, that matter came to Parliament, it was debated, and in the end, it was not the central bank that determined the printing contract because it was there even before I joined in, and so I was exonerated on that, and the reports are very clear. I've never been involved in contract for publishing, for any currency printing. And again, the Treasury also went into joint venture with the Deraru, and that is how the issues were determined. So it was not a purview of the central bank, and the matter was dissolved that way in the central bank. The Imperial Bank never collapsed when I was in the central bank. I had already left, and it was several years when I had left. And the bottom line is that I was never part of that, and I never flouted, and also the flouting of the procurement rules. I never flouted any rules because in the then law, since then they have been revised, and bear me with that. Since then, the procurement law has been revised. The CEO of an organization, his role was, or his or her role was to appoint the procurement committee. If the procurement committee made a decision, the CEO could not vary that decision. Since then, and I had already left the central bank, things have changed and the law has been revised. Let me also say, the issue of banks propping the sharing, that was not correct. It is like the same situation we are in now. We are having supply-side shocks, and because of the persistent shocks, you can see the dollar supply has been minimal. And so in a sense, when you look at our current account deficit, it is the one that signals whether the currency is going to depreciate or appreciate. And that is the same situation with external shocks, and this is consistent with the African economies. Again, we went through the motion with a special parliamentary committee on that, and we dissolved the matter that actually this was the preference. That is why, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned that I had issues with saying, how do we create buffers that help us to mitigate short-term shocks? And the whole issue, the whole issue of Imperial Bank and my wife going to Thailand, this is a paid service. It was an agent of that company that was giving those the services, and it was paid.
Did you hear what he asked?
Yes.
He said, or rather he alleged, that in certain proceedings, the former owner of Imperial Bank alleged that he paid for an expensive holiday for your family. When you learned of it, you cut short the holiday, came back, and collapsed the bank. That's what he alleged.
Yes,
and that's what you should respond to.
Thank you, Chairman. The bank collapsed in 2017, and I was not governor then. and I was even away from the country. I was working from outside the country. So it did not collapse in when I was a governor. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, just to, for your indulgence, Chair. You see, two issues, Chair. The issue of the shilling that I raised, it is true that the scenario looks like now. But, Chair, just as a supplementary question, the shilling now is stuck at that level. By that time, a committee of parliament was formed, and I suspect you were in parliament by then. Then, after the investigation of parliament ended in a month or a month and a half, the shilling came back from 120, came back to 90. So it looked like a setup. Then lastly, Chair, did the trip to Thailand happen or did it not happen, in spite of the bank collapsing in 2017?
Thank you, Chairman. Let me say this. Once the crisis has been resolved, then there is inflow of foreign exchange. And because we have an open capital account and a floating exchange rate, the appreciation will always take place because the depreciation is coming because of scarcity. And that's what happened. You can even produce graphs to that effect. That is, I wanted to correct that. The trip to Thailand took place in 2014. And then the agent of that was himself, I can't remember the name of the one you have mentioned. And we were paying him in advance to go. So it was a trip that was paid for. You pay him. So it took place, we paid.
He was a travel agent.
Yeah, he was an agent of that particular resort. And you paid him directly. And then and all those details are there.
Did you pay for the holiday?
I paid for that holiday for my wife.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we done with the four?